The ceasefire came just in time. Back on Earth, the broadcast from Proxima had ignited a firestorm of public outrage. Videos of the Luminae's shattered city and the crew's desperate efforts to protect them spread across news outlets and social media. The world saw the devastation caused by General Harold Price's rogue faction, and they demanded justice. Protesters filled the streets, holding signs that read "Peace, not war," and "Listen to the Luminae." Politicians who had once supported aggressive expansion into space were forced to backtrack, promising transparency and accountability. General Price was arrested shortly after the scandal broke, his actions condemned as reckless and inhumane. The United Nations Space Exploration Agency, UNSEA, issued an official apology to the Luminae, pledging full support for their relocation efforts. Humanity, it seemed, had learned a painful but necessary lesson. Trust could not be rebuilt with weapons, only with kindness. On Proxima, the crew worked tirelessly alongside the Luminae to repair the damage. With Sophie Lane's sacrifice still fresh in their minds, everyone felt a renewed sense of purpose. Alex Monroe led the team with quiet determination, ensuring that every task, no matter how small, was done with care. Rachel Myers continued decoding the Luminae's language, uncovering new insights into their culture and history. Even Hayes marveled at the resilience of the alien species, studying their biology to better understand how they adapted to such harsh conditions. Even Chris Blake, whose earlier arrogance had nearly cost them everything, pitched in without complaint, his attitude softened by guilt and regret. As weeks turned into months, humanity and the Luminae forged a fragile but growing partnership. Engineers from Earth arrived with supplies and technology to assist in building a massive ark, a spacecraft designed to carry the Luminae to a new home. In return, the Luminae shared some of their knowledge, teaching humans about sustainable energy sources and advanced medical techniques. These breakthroughs promised to revolutionize life on Earth, offering solutions to problems like climate change and disease. Rachel became a bridge between the two species, her ability to communicate with the Luminae earning her widespread admiration. Through her translations, the aliens expressed their gratitude, not just for the help, but for humanity's willingness to change. "You listened," one of their messages read. "That is more than we expected." Alex returned to Earth a changed man. The mission had tested him in ways he never imagined, forcing him to confront both his own flaws and humanity's darker instincts. He gave interviews about the importance of diplomacy and cooperation, urging world leaders to prioritize peace over power. His words resonated deeply, inspiring a new generation of explorers committed to ethical space exploration. Even dedicated his life to studying interspecies relationships, becoming a leading advocate for coexistence. He often spoke about Sophie's bravery, reminding people that even small acts of courage could spark monumental change. Chris, too, found redemption in service, joining a program aimed at preventing future conflicts in space. As the Luminae prepared to leave Proxima aboard their newly constructed ark, they left behind a final message for humanity. Translated by Rachel, it read, "Thank you for listening. May your journey through the stars bring light, not darkness." The ark launched into the sky, its surface glowing softly as it disappeared into the void. Watching from below, Alex and his crew felt a mix of sadness and hope. They had lost much, but gained something far greater, a chance to rewrite humanity's story among the stars. Back on Earth, forests began to heal, cities embraced cleaner technologies, and nations worked together like never before. Though scars remained, humanity stepped forward into a brighter future, guided by the lessons of Proxima. And somewhere, deep in the cosmos, the Luminae sailed toward a new beginning, carrying with them the memory of a species that had finally chosen to listen. The crew stood amidst the wreckage, their hearts heavy with grief and guilt. The once beautiful city of the Luminae was now a scene of destruction, its glowing structures shattered and its inhabitants scattered. Rachel Myers worked quickly to communicate with the surviving Luminae, her voice trembling as she relayed their sorrowful messages. "They're scared," she said, tears streaming down her face. "They trusted us, and we let them down." Alex Monroe's mind raced. He knew they had to act fast, not just to protect the Luminae, but to prevent further attacks from Earth. General Harold Price's rogue faction had acted without authority, but unless the truth was exposed, more violence could follow. "We need to get this story back to Earth," Alex said firmly, his tone leaving no room for argument. "The world needs to know what happened here." Sophie Lane nodded, her hands stained with dirt and soot from helping the injured Luminae. "But how? If we broadcast it, Price might intercept the signal and block it." "We'll have to take the risk," Alex replied. "Rachel, can you send a secure transmission using their technology?" Rachel hesitated, glancing at the damaged equipment around them. "I can try, but it won't be easy. Their systems are complex, and I'm still learning how they work." "Then we'll help you," even Hayes chimed in, stepping forward. "Whatever it takes." As the team worked together, Chris Blake remained unusually quiet. Gone was his usual defiance. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, his eyes fixed on the ruins around them. When Sophie handed him a tool to assist with the repairs, he took it without complaint, his movements deliberate and focused. Hours passed before Rachel finally managed to establish a connection. Using the Luminae's advanced communication system, she sent a detailed account of the attack back to Earth, including video footage of the devastation and translations of the Luminae's pleas for peace. The message was encrypted to avoid interception, but there was no guarantee it would reach the right people. While they waited for a response, the crew did everything they could to help the Luminae recover. Sophie used spare parts from the ship to repair some of the damaged machines, while Evan and Rachel tended to the wounded aliens. Alex coordinated their efforts, ensuring everyone stayed safe despite the lingering threat of another strike. Then tragedy struck again. As they worked near the edge of the city, a second wave of missiles streaked across the sky. This time, the crew saw them coming and tried to warn the Luminae, but there wasn't enough time to evacuate everyone. Sophie pushed several Luminae out of harm's way, shielding them with her body as an explosion rocked the area. The force of the blast threw her backward, and when the dust settled, she lay motionless on the ground. "No," Alex shouted, rushing to her side. The rest of the crew followed, their faces pale with shock. Sophie's breathing was shallow, her injuries severe. Chris knelt beside her, his expression grim. For the first time, there was no trace of anger or arrogance in his eyes, only pain. "She saved them," Rachel whispered, her voice breaking. "She gave her life for them." Sophie's sacrifice galvanized the team. They vowed to honor her memory by doing everything in their power to stop the violence. Within hours, their broadcast reached Earth, sparking outrage among the public. Protests erupted worldwide, demanding an end to the attacks and accountability for General Price's actions. UNSCE officials condemned the strikes, ordering an immediate ceasefire. Back on Proxima, the Luminae began to rebuild, their lights flickering faintly but steadily. Through Rachel, they expressed their gratitude to the crew, especially to Sophie. Though her death weighed heavily on everyone, her bravery became a symbol of hope, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, humanity could choose compassion over conflict. As the days passed, the bond between the humans and the Luminae grew stronger. Together, they began planning for the future, determined to ensure that Sophie's sacrifice wouldn't be in vain. The next morning, the crew woke to find the Luminae city transformed. The strange machines that had begun rising from the ground were now fully assembled, towering over the glowing forests and crystal structures. Their surfaces shimmered with an otherworldly energy, and their purpose remained unclear. Rachel Myers worked tirelessly to communicate with the Luminae, hoping to understand what was happening. "They're not attacking us," Rachel explained after hours of decoding their light patterns. "These machines, they're not weapons. They're terraforming devices." "Terraforming?" Even Hayes asked, his brow furrowed. "You mean like changing the environment?" Rachel nodded. Yes, but not for this planet. They're preparing to leave Proxima. Their star is dying faster than we thought, and they don't have much time left. The revelation hit the crew like a shockwave. Sophie Lane leaned back in her chair, her face pale. So they're evacuating, leaving their home. It's more than that, Rachel continued. They've been searching for another planet to live on, but they haven't found one yet. That's why they sent the signal, to warn others not to repeat the mistakes that led them here. Alex Monroe listened carefully, his mind racing. If they're leaving, maybe we can help them. Earth has resources, technology. We could assist with their relocation. Chris Blake snorted, crossing his arms. Help them. After everything they've done to scare us, why should we risk our necks for them? Because it's the right thing to do. Alex shot back, his voice firm. They're not our enemies, Chris. They're just trying to survive. Even stepped forward, his eyes bright with excitement. Think about it. If we help them, they might share their knowledge with us. We could learn so much about medicine, biology, even space travel. Sophie nodded in agreement. And it's not just about what we gain. Helping them could show that humanity is capable of cooperation, not just conquest. The idea began to take shape. Working together, the crew devised a plan to offer assistance to the Luminae. Through Rachel, they proposed sharing Earth's resources and helping the aliens find a new home. At first, the Luminae seemed hesitant, their lights flickering uncertainly. But as the message was repeated, with sincerity and respect, they began to respond. They're willing to consider it, Rachel said, relief evident in her voice. But they need proof that we're serious. They've been betrayed before, and they're afraid of making the wrong choice. Alex turned to the crew. Then we'll give them that proof. We'll show them that we're different. As the days passed, trust between the humans and the Luminae slowly grew. The crew worked alongside the aliens, learning how to operate their machines and understand their technology. Even marveled at the intricacies of their systems, while Sophie helped repair damaged parts using tools from the ship. Even Chris, though reluctant at first, pitched in when he realized the Luminae weren't planning to harm them. But just as things began to improve, disaster struck. A rogue faction within UNSCA, led by General Harold Price, launched a preemptive strike against Proxima B missiles streaked through the atmosphere, targeting the Luminae city. Explosions rocked the ground, sending shards of crystal flying and destroying parts of the alien settlement. The crew scrambled to protect themselves and the Luminae. Sophie shielded a group of the glowing beings from falling debris, while Evan and Rachel tried to calm the panicked aliens. Alex shouted orders, doing everything he could to keep his team safe. Chris, for once, set aside his hostility and helped carry injured Luminae to safety. When the attack finally ended, the devastation was clear. Countless Luminae had been killed, and their city lay in ruins. Tears streamed down Rachel's face as she translated the Luminae's anguished messages. They trusted us, she whispered, and we failed them. Alex clenched his fists, anger and guilt burning inside him. He knew there was only one way to make things right. Turning to the crew, he said, "We need to stop this madness. Right now." The next day started with an uneasy tension in the air. Chris Blake had grown increasingly restless, his frustration boiling over during meals and discussions. He didn't hide his belief that the crew was wasting time trying to make friends with the Luminae. "We're sitting on a goldmine here," he muttered one morning as the team prepared to meet with their alien hosts. "If we don't take what we need, someone else will." Alex Monroe ignored the comment, focusing instead on keeping the peace. But when Chris disappeared later that afternoon without telling anyone, Alex's patience wore thin. "Where is he?" Alex asked sharply, scanning the area around the ship. The rest of the crew exchanged worried glances. It didn't take long to find him. Chris was deep in the glowing forest, crouched beside a cluster of strange, crystalline plants. In his hand, he held a small container filled with samples he'd collected. When Alex confronted him, Chris stood up, unapologetic. What? These could be valuable. We need to bring something back for Earth. You disobeyed orders, Alex snapped, his voice low but firm. Do you have any idea how dangerous this is? The Luminae trusted us to respect their world. They're not going to miss a few plants, Chris shot back, rolling his eyes. Stop acting like they're gods. They're just aliens. Before Alex could respond, the ground beneath them began to tremble. Strange, glowing tendrils erupted from the soil, wrapping around nearby trees and rocks. The forest seemed to come alive, pulsing with an angry energy. Alarmed, Alex grabbed Chris by the arm and dragged him back toward the ship. This is exactly why we don't act without thinking, Alex growled. By the time they returned, the rest of the crew and the Luminae were waiting. The aliens' lights flickered rapidly, their usual calm replaced by something closer to agitation. Rachel Myers quickly worked to translate their message. Her face paled as she turned to the group. They know what Chris did. They think we're invaders. Panic spread among the crew. Even Hayes stepped forward, holding up his hands in a gesture of peace. Tell them it was a mistake, he urged Rachel. Explain that we didn't mean to hurt them. Rachel relayed the message, her voice trembling. The Luminae paused, their lights dimming slightly. For a moment, it seemed like the situation might calm down. But then, Chris spoke up. Why are we groveling to them? If they got advanced tech, we should be figuring out how to use it, not apologizing. His words infuriated Alex. You don't get it, do you? Alex shouted, rounding on him. This isn't about you or your ego. One wrong move, and we could lose everything, including our lives. The argument escalated into a shouting match, with Chris refusing to back down. Tempers flared until Sophie Lane stepped between them. Enough, she yelled, her voice cutting through the chaos. Fighting each other won't solve anything. If we want to survive this, we need to work together. Her words seemed to sink in, at least for Alex. Taking a deep breath, he turned to the Luminae. Through Rachel, he apologized sincerely, promising to return the stolen samples. Chris reluctantly handed over the container, though his scowl made it clear he wasn't happy about it. For now, the Luminae accepted the apology. Their lights returned to their normal rhythm, and the forest settled back into its eerie stillness. But the damage had been done. Around the edges of the alien city, large machines began to rise from the ground, their purpose unclear but their presence ominous. That night, as the crew gathered inside the ship, Alex addressed them. We dodged a bullet today, he said, his tone heavy with regret. But if we don't start working as a team, we won't get another chance. No one disagreed, though Chris remained silent, staring out the window at the glowing horizon. Whatever trust they'd built with the Luminae felt fragile, ready to shatter at the slightest misstep. And none of them knew how much time they had left to make things right. The next morning, the crew woke to find the Luminae waiting outside their ship. The glowing beings seemed more curious than hostile, their lights pulsing gently as if inviting the humans to join them. Rachel Myers was the first to step out, eager to continue decoding their language. Alex Monroe followed closely, keeping a watchful eye on the surroundings. Even Hayes and Sophie Lane brought equipment to study the environment, while Chris Blake stayed near the ship, his hand never far from his weapon. As the day went on, communication with the Luminae improved. Rachel discovered that their light patterns weren't just random. They were part of a complex system, almost like a written language. Through trial and error, she managed to piece together fragments of their history. The Luminae had once lived in peace, thriving alongside their planet's ecosystems. But everything changed when another species arrived, seeking to claim Proxima for themselves. They didn't come to talk, Rachel explained to the group during a break. They came to take. They stripped the land, polluted the air, and nearly wiped out the Luminae. Alex frowned, his mind racing with questions. Did the Luminae fight back? Rachel nodded. Yes, but it cost them dearly. They say they used their technology to drive the invaders away, but their world was left scared. That's why they sent the signal, to warn others not to make the same mistake. Even looked around at the glowing forests and crystal structures. It's hard to imagine anyone wanting to destroy all this. It's beautiful. Chris snorted, shaking his head. Beautiful or not, we can't ignore what they have here. Their tech is advanced, way beyond anything we've got. Imagine what we could do with it back on Earth. Sophie shot him a sharp look. At what cost? You heard what happened last time someone tried to take from them. Do you really want to risk starting another war? Chris shrugged, unconvinced. Maybe they're bluffing. Maybe they're just trying to scare us off. His words hung in the air, creating an uneasy silence. Alex stepped in before the argument could escalate. We're not here to take anything. Our mission is peaceful exploration. Let's focus on building trust, not finding ways to exploit them. But Chris wasn't the only one struggling with temptation. Back on Earth, news of the Luminae's advanced technology had sparked debates among politicians and scientists. Some argued that humanity needed every advantage it could get, especially with Earth's resources dwindling. Others worried about the ethical implications of interfering with an alien civilization. Meanwhile, tensions within the crew began to grow. During one exchange with the Luminae, Chris wandered off without permission, claiming he wanted a closer look at some nearby crystals. When Alex found out, he confronted him immediately. What were you thinking? Alex demanded, his voice low but firm. You don't go off alone. Not here. Chris rolled his eyes. Relax, I wasn't doing anything wrong. Besides, those crystals might be worth studying. We could learn something useful. Alex clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to argue further. He knew Chris's actions were reckless, but he also understood the pressure they were under. Still, he couldn't let personal ambition jeopardize the mission, or the fragile peace they'd established. That evening, as the crew gathered inside the ship, Rachel shared more of what she'd learned. The Luminae weren't just warning humanity, they were pleading for help. Their star was dying, and they feared their time was running out. They're asking us to listen, Rachel said softly, not just to their words, but to their pain. They've already lost so much. Sophie sighed, rubbing her temples. So what do? We can't save their planet, but we can't turn our backs on them either. Alex stared out the window at the glowing landscape. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on his shoulders. He thought about Laura Bennett's note, still tucked safely in his pocket. Her words echoed in his mind. Be careful, asterisk. Careful, he realized, meant more than just avoiding conflict. It meant choosing empathy over greed, understanding over fear. But as he glanced at Chris, who was quietly cleaning his weapon, Alex wondered if everyone on the team was ready to make that choice. The crew stood frozen as the glowing beings approached, their translucent forms shimmering like living prisms. Each creature floated gracefully through the air, emitting soft pulses of light that seemed to follow a pattern. Rachel Myers adjusted her recording device, her hands trembling slightly with excitement. This is it, she murmured. They're trying to talk to us. Alex Monroe held up a hand, signaling the team to stay calm. Let's not make any sudden moves, he said firmly, his eyes locked on the aliens. The last thing they needed was to appear threatening. Behind him, Chris Blake tightened his grip on his weapon, his stance tense and ready for action. Sophie Lane glanced at him nervously, but focused on scanning the area for anything unusual. Even Hayes, the biologist, couldn't help but step forward, his scientific curiosity overpowering his caution. Look at them, he whispered, awe in his voice. They're incredible. Do you think they're the ones who sent the signal? Before anyone could answer, one of the glowing beings moved closer, its light pulsing faster. Rachel quickly matched the rhythm on her tablet, attempting to mimic the pattern. To everyone's surprise, the being responded, its glow shifting into a new sequence. A grin spread across Rachel's face. It's working. They're responding. Over the next few hours, Rachel worked tirelessly to decode the patterns. With each exchange, the communication became clearer. The beings, who called themselves the Luminae, were indeed intelligent, and they had been expecting the humans. Through Rachel's translations, the crew learned that the Luminae lived in harmony with their planet, relying on its natural resources without causing harm. But there was something else, a deep sadness in their messages. "They're saying their world is dying," Rachel explained, her voice heavy with emotion. "Their star is unstable, and they've been searching for a way to survive. That's why they sent the signal, to warn others not to repeat their mistakes." Chris frowned, crossing his arms. "So they're scared we'll take over? Is that what this is about?" Rachel shook her head. "No, it's more than that. They've seen other species come here before, species like us. Those invaders tried to conquer Proxima, destroying its ecosystems in the process. The Luminae fought back, but they lost so much." Alex listened carefully, his expression thoughtful. "If that's true, then we need to show them we're different. We can't afford to make the same mistakes." But Chris wasn't convinced. "And what if they attack first? What if they think we're just another threat?" "We can't go in blind, Alex. We need to protect ourselves." Tensions between the two men began to rise, but Sophie stepped in, her voice firm yet calm. "Arguing isn't going to help. We're here to learn, not fight. Let's focus on building trust." As night fell on Proxima, the landscape transformed. The bioluminescent forests lit up in waves of color, casting an ethereal glow over everything. The Luminae led the crew to a massive crystalline structure that pulsed with energy. Inside, intricate designs covered the walls, glowing faintly as if alive. It was clear this was no ordinary building. It was a hub of knowledge, technology, and culture. Even marveled at the sight, snapping photos and taking notes. "This changes everything we know about life beyond Earth," he said, his voice filled with wonder. "We could learn so much from them." But as the crew explored further, they noticed something unsettling. Some of the Luminae carried scars, faint marks on their translucent bodies that hinted at past battles. Rachel translated fragments of their messages, piecing together stories of loss and resilience. It became clear that the Luminae weren't just wary of humanity. They were afraid. Later that evening, as the crew gathered around a portable heater inside their ship, Alex addressed the group. "We have a responsibility here," he said, his tone serious. "These beings are offering us a chance to prove we're better than the ones who came before us. If we screw this up, we might lose more than just their trust." Everyone nodded, though Chris still looked uneasy. Outside, the Luminae continued to watch, their lights flickering softly in the darkness. For now, peace hung in the balance, but how long would it last? The United Nations Space Exploration Agency, UNSEA, moved quickly after the signal's discovery. Within weeks, plans for a mission to Proxima Centauri were finalized. The project was named Project Outreach *, and its goal was clear: send a team to investigate the source of the mysterious message. Despite Laura Bennett's warnings about proceeding too hastily, excitement among scientists, politicians, and the public overshadowed her concerns. For many, this was humanity's chance to step boldly into the unknown. Commander Alex Monroe was chosen to lead the mission. A calm and experienced astronaut in his late 40s, Alex had spent years training for deep space exploration. He was joined by 4 other specialists, each picked for their unique skills. Rachel Myers, the communications expert, had a sharp mind for languages and patterns, making her the ideal candidate to decipher alien signals. Even Hayes, a biologist with a passion for extraterrestrial life, hoped to study any new species they might encounter. Sophie Lane, the engineer, kept the ship running smoothly, while Chris Blake, the security officer, ensured the crew's safety. Before leaving Earth, the team gathered at UNSEA headquarters for final briefings. Laura attended one of these meetings, clutching the handwritten note she intended to give Alex. As the others discussed strategies and equipment, she pulled him aside. "Alex," she said quietly, looking up at him with serious eyes. "Please, be careful. This isn't just about science or exploration. If the Luminae, whoever they are, sent that message, it means they're afraid of us. Don't let your guard down, but don't provoke them either." Alex nodded slowly, tucking the note into his pocket without reading it. "I'll do my best, Laura, but you know how these things go. Once we're out there, decisions won't always be mine to make." The launch day arrived under a cloudless sky. Thousands of people gathered to watch as the sleek spacecraft ascended into orbit, carrying the hopes of humanity with it. Inside the ship, the crew felt a mix of nerves and excitement. Rachel adjusted her headset, double-checking the communication systems, while Evan flipped through notes on potential alien ecosystems. Sophie monitored the engines, ensuring everything functioned perfectly, and Chris paced the cabin, his hand resting on the holster of his sidearm. For months, the journey to Proxima Centauri passed uneventfully. The crew grew closer, sharing meals and stories during their downtime. Still, tensions simmered beneath the surface. Chris often argued that humanity shouldn't hesitate to assert itself if the aliens proved hostile. "We can't afford to be weak," he said during one heated discussion. "If they're advanced, we need to show them we're not pushovers." Evan disagreed. Asserting dominance could backfire. What if they're already watching us? What if they see our weapons and assume the worst? Alex tried to mediate, reminding everyone that their primary mission was peaceful exploration. But doubts lingered in his mind. What if Laura was right? What if they were walking into a situation they didn't fully understand? As the ship approached Proxima, the crew prepared for landing. Through the windows, they caught their first glimpse of the planet. A swirling mix of blues, greens, and purples, unlike anything they'd ever seen. Strange, glowing forests stretched across the surface, and towering crystal structures shimmered in the sunlight. It was beautiful and utterly alien. When the ship touched down, the crew stepped onto the planet's surface for the first time. The air was breathable, though tinged with an unfamiliar scent. As they ventured away from the ship, they noticed movement in the distance. Floating shapes, translucent and glowing softly, drifted toward them. These creatures seemed curious but cautious, their bodies pulsing with light in rhythmic patterns. Rachel immediately began recording the lights, trying to decode their meaning. "This is incredible," she whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They're communicating." But Alex couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, not just by the glowing beings, but by something far greater. Somewhere in the back of his mind, Laura's warning echoed faintly. In a small observatory hidden high in the mountains of Colorado, Laura Bennett sat alone in the dim glow of her computer screens. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional crackle of static from the radio equipment. Outside, snow blanketed the peaks, and the cold night air pressed against the glass windows. Laura had spent years searching the skies, hoping to find something, anything, that might prove humanity wasn't alone in the universe. Tonight, it seemed her patience was about to pay off. As she studied the data streaming in from the telescope, something unusual caught her eye. A faint signal, barely noticeable at first, pulsed rhythmically across one of the monitors. At first, Laura thought it was just interference, maybe a glitch in the system or some stray radio waves bouncing off Earth's satellites. But as she zoomed in on the readings, her heart began to race. The signal wasn't random. It followed a pattern, repeating itself with mathematical precision. It was artificial. Someone, or something, had sent it. Laura leaned closer to the screen, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she ran tests to confirm her findings. She cross-checked the signal's origin and traced it back to a distant star system, Proxima Centauri, the closest known star to Earth. Her breath caught in her throat. Could this be real? Was this proof of intelligent life beyond Earth? She quickly called her colleague, Daniel Carter, who was working late in another part of the observatory. He arrived moments later, rubbing his tired eyes. "What is it, Laura?" he asked, his voice tinged with curiosity. "I think we found something," she replied, pointing to the screen. Daniel frowned as he examined the data. After a few minutes, he nodded slowly. This isn't natural. It's too organized." Together, they worked through the night, analyzing every detail of the signal. By morning, they had decoded part of its message. It was simple but unmistakable. "Humans must not invade us, please." The word sent chills down Laura's spine. She stared at the screen, her mind racing with questions. Who were us? Why would they send such a message? And what did they mean by invade? Daniel scratched his head, looking skeptical. "Maybe it's a warning," he said. "Or maybe it's a test, a way to see how we'll react." Laura shook her head firmly. "We can't ignore this. If there's intelligent life out there, we need to approach them carefully. We can't just barge in like we own the place." But not everyone shared Laura's caution. When news of the discovery reached the United Nations Space Exploration Agency, UNSEA, excitement spread like wildfire. Some scientists argued that the signal was an invitation to explore, a chance to make contact with another civilization. Others saw it as a challenge, a sign that humanity needed to assert its dominance in the galaxy. Politicians and military leaders began discussing plans to send a mission to Proxima Centauri. Laura tried to speak out, warning anyone who would listen about the dangers of rushing into contact without understanding the full context of the message. "They told us not to invade," she insisted during a meeting with UNSEA officials. "That has to mean something." But her pleas fell on deaf ears. The decision was made. A crewed spacecraft would be sent to investigate the source of the signal. As the preparations began, Laura couldn't shake the feeling that humanity was walking into a trap, or worse, making a terrible mistake.